I've been wanting to do a video about inflation for a while because it's going to fit into a bunch of videos that are upcoming, and inflation plays a major role. So I've named this video Inflation Scam: How Manipulated CPI Steals from You. And this is not an original idea by me. I first came across this concept reading Peter Schiff's Crash Proof 2.0 a few years ago, and it really opened my eyes to kind of some of the things that are happening around us that I think are important for people to understand and know. And I'll also reference a couple of other videos, and I'll put the links to these down in the description below. But Peter Schiff has been very vocal about inflation and what's happening in the marketplace. So I'll do a separate video on Peter sometime in the future. But it's easily said that inflation is one of the cruelest taxes because the people that are less well off are going to get hit with it first. People living paycheck to paycheck, your food goes up, things that you need, energy, becomes very important to you, just to survive, on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And so inflating away their ability to buy, just fundamental goods and services is very important. And that's why inflation is one of those things that it tries to stay hidden with some help, or is hidden. And the government has an incentive to keep the CPI number, which Consumer Price Index, low, but real inflation number high. And if we look at the CPI, by definition, it means a statistical estimate of the change in prices for a basket of goods and services purchased by households. And this is calculated by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they come up with this number, and it's changed over the years, which I'll get into in a minute. But its use is for things like adjusting Social Security payments, eligibility levels, for financial assistance from the government, tax brackets, government assistance, military, military pay, and civil service pay. So, because CPI is used in all of these different things, the government wants to underreport the number that you see in order to keep, what the government's paying out down. And, we can see this from the outlays that we talked about. So the Social Security payments, the eligibility levels, tax brackets, and all the things I mentioned just a minute ago. And especially when we look at tax brackets, they want the tax brackets to move very little, but allow the collection, which would in turn allow the collection of more taxes, because your salary's going up, but inflation's low. And the government also has an incentive from the standpoint of our debt. So we have $30 trillion in debt, and they are trying to inflate that away so it becomes something smaller. But in future videos, I'll talk more about how kind of the gig is up and why I believe that we're moving into something really awful from an economic perspective. So how is it manipulated? Well, there's a number of ways, and George Gammon actually did an excellent video on this, and so I'm going to put the link to it. I don't like to repeat what somebody has done well, and I would take the 20 minutes or 10 minutes if you 2x your speed on your YouTube, you can listen to George's explanation of the consumer price index, mentioning that it's a scam in his headline also. But there are, mentioning a couple of the big ones that Peter Schiff mentions, as well as George Gammon, are, the commodity substitution bias, where you may be buying a name brand, but if you can buy a generic or something that's equivalent but less expensive, the Kroger brand in my case, with my grocery store, then you can get things for less price, but you're not getting the original thing. So that could show as a way of reducing the price. One of the big ones that's talked about quite a bit by Peter Schiff is in 1983, they went with, instead of an increase in the housing prices, they went with the owner's equivalent rent, which is basically, instead of the cost of buying a home, it gets into calling up homeowners and asking them, what would you rent your house for? And, these are numbers now. If you go to Zillow or Trulia or some of these places, they have what the estimated rent might be. So there's probably better sources than just calling up a homeowner. I wouldn't know how much to rent my house for. So as opposed to actual rents, you're getting some guess of what people are. And I just saw, yesterday on one of the channels that, the average rent price is now like $2,000. Or the median rent price is $2,000. So anyway, those are some of the things that are happening with the CPI. Now there's also the core CPI, which you would think core CPI, it almost tricks you because you think core CPI, okay, what's core to my living? I need food, I need energy. Oh, well, core CPI doesn't include those two things. So when you hear people say core CPI, I know it's kind of a shocker to me, because they're not talking about gas, and they're not talking about, energy in general, and they're not talking about food, which is really what we need to live. So anyway, those are some of the things that when you dig into this, it kind of surprised me when I first learned about it. One of the other things that's changed because of some of the manipulation, there are a number of manipulations. Again, I would encourage people to watch George Gammon's video, but there is a website called shadowstats.com, and this comes from a guy named John Williams, and I actually will put a link to his video, his interview. It's about 27 minutes, but he walks through how we're underreporting the original CPIs that, for instance, they would have used in the 1970s, which was supposedly the highest inflation we've ever had. And when you look at some of the calculations that John Williams came up with, you'll find that if we use the 1970s figures and calculations, that today, instead of the 8.5% inflation rate that we have, it's more like 17.5%. It's something much higher. Certainly north of 15%, and so spend some time on his website. I just go and reference it and just see how it's comparing, and some of the comments that he makes there. It's a worthwhile visit. So that's what I want to cover on CPI, and again, it's for future videos that I'll be doing. I'll put a link to the 3 videos that I think are useful for people to understand. If you want to go deeper into it. Also, I typically like Peter Schiff's book, Crash Proof 2.0. It's very eye-opening. So I'll put a link to his book there. And that's what I wanted to cover this video. It kind of sets up, like I said, for future videos. And, my tagline is, remember, there is always a better way.